Hello and welcome to LMLM Teaches English. In this video I'm going to be talking to you about the poem Ozymandias from the AQA Power and Conflict Anthology, and this was written by Percy Shelley. So what I'll do in this video is I will read the poem to you, then I will talk to you about the title and the poet, then I will talk you through some key quotes from this poem and the language the writer uses, and then finally I'll talk you through the themes and some other poems that would compare well to this one. So let's begin. Ozymandias by Percy Shelley. I met a traveller from an antique land who said, "Two vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them, on the sand, half sunk, a shuttered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions read, which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things, the hand that mocked them and the heart that fed. And on the pedestal these words appear, my name is Ozymandias, King of Kings, look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away." So first of all, about the title of the poem then, Ozymandias was the Greek name for Ramesses II, who was a king or a pharaoh of Egypt. And he was famous for being particularly cruel and harsh as a ruler. Percy Shelley came to write about the statue of Ozymandias, or the man Ozymandias, when the statue was moved to a museum in England, and it was a competition that he set up with other poets to write a poem about this statue, and this was his interpretation. Percy Shelley himself was a romantic poet. He led a very interesting life, including being married to Mary Shelley, the writer of Frankenstein. But the context that you will need to know is that he was a romantic, which means that he loved nature, and it also means that he was anti-establishment. And all that means is any kind of organised church or the government. He was kind of against the way they ran the country, which at the time, to be fair, was pretty bad for anybody who was poor or different in any way. Percy Shelley's most relevant act that he did around this time was he was a rich boy, grew up in a wealthy family, went to Oxford University, and while he was there he wrote a paper on atheism, which led him to be expelled because you weren't allowed to speak out against these things at the time. So the poem as a whole, Ozymandias, is kind of about Percy Shelley's hate of establishment and is kind of him ridiculing that. So when he talks about Ozymandias being this kind of arrogant, cruel leader with his wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command, it's supposed to be mocking and ironic. He's mocking these rulers because on the one hand they're here and they're snarling and they've got these horrible looks on their faces and they're all powerful and arrogant, but on the other hand he has this shattered visage. He's crumbling, he's falling down. So in other words, the message here is that power doesn't last, even the mighty will fall. Which is obviously a cliche now, but something that he wanted to teach us, I suppose. In some ways this gives us reassurance because it means that those people who are in power now, ruling us, don't worry, their time will come. But in other ways it's not reassuring at all because it does remind us that everything will eventually die. Everything is finite, including human life, which can be both reassuring and scary. Okay, so I've picked out some of the key quotes from this poem that I think really sum up nicely what this poem is about. And I'm also going to look at some of the language features that Shelley has chosen to use. I think one that we pick up quite easily, especially when reading this poem aloud, is his use of alliteration. Oh, can you see that one? And sibilance. So alliteration is when you have the same letter repeated at the start of consecutive words, and sibilance is when that letter is particularly an S sound. So in this case, we've got stone, stand, we've got legs and trunkless as well, and even vast and desert. So all of those S's have that effect of creating that S sound, and that can be for various reasons. In this case, perhaps to highlight the sand and the wind, the sound though they would make, sort of like a sandstorm, and how nature is all powerful and will eventually lead to the ruin of this statue. Also, so we'll call that sibilance here. Also, in this first quote that I've picked out for you, two vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert, we've got a couple of other nice techniques going on here. So we have the word vast, which implies grand, it implies power. And then we have trunkless, which means literally without a torso, but also implies weakness, lacking something. So of course, some of you will already be ahead of me, when you put those two words together, side by side, you come up with something called an oxymoron or juxtaposition. And those, as well as being wonderful words in their own right, also imply a kind of the message that Shelley is trying to get across here, and that is that you might be vast and powerful, but ultimately you will end up weak, or trunkless in this case. The other word in this quote that's quite interesting to explode or take a closer look at is the word desert. Obviously we know we're in a desert because we're in Egypt, but also you can't help but think about the connotations of the word desert. Firstly being isolation. And in this case that's very important because the statue of Ozymandias has crumbled and fallen apart and shattered because it's old and he's dead and there's no one there to look after it, but also because if he had been a kinder, more benevolent ruler, perhaps people wouldn't have deserted him in the desert, perhaps people wouldn't have left him isolated, they would have taken care of his statue. If you think of people who have been great figures throughout history, I'm sure their statues have been taken care of because people love them. Think about gravesides of people who are well loved, there's always lots of flowers by them. Again, perhaps there's a message there that none of us are immortal. We're all going to die. Everything's finite. But if you are kind to people and you leave behind a nice legacy, people are more likely to remember you and talk about you. And in that way, you can be immortal and you can live on. So it's perhaps a message for those people who are in power, as well as a message for those of us who aren't. So the next line, wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command, creates that brilliant image of the look on the statue's face. And if you Google Ozymandias, the statue, you can see the look on his face is very harsh. So we've got the wrinkled lip to show that he's kind of looking down on people, and the sneer is this kind of arrogance and looking down. And then we've also got these lovely alliterative words, cold command, which cause you, when you say them, to make that harsh sound. Perhaps to imply how cruel of a ruler he was. Speaking in that way, cold command. A line that kind of goes hand in hand with that, or links straight on, is the line, "Its sculptor well those passions read." I know that line sounds confusing when you first read it, but if you just reorder these last four words, so tell that its sculptor read those passions well, makes a bit more sense. So in other words, the sculptor read the passions or the look or the emotions on Ozymandias' face very well, so he conveyed them onto the sculpture. So the statue itself clearly looks like Ozymandias and the look he would have had on his face. So this is interesting, obviously, because in a way the sculptor is kind of like the voice of Shelley or Shelley himself, in that he's mocking Ozymandias. He's putting that stupid, cruel look on his face to mock him, which is brilliant. It's a little in-joke for the people looking at the statue. But almost what makes it funnier in a way is that Ozymandias has approved this statue. He's looked at it after the sculptor's finished with it and he said, yeah, perfect, that's exactly what I wanted you to get across. And he's put that out in the desert for everybody to see. So he's obviously, that was the look he wanted people to, the impression he wanted people to have of him. The next line is the words on his pedestal, look on my works, ye mighty in despair, which is a brilliant quote to explode because of the two meanings. The first one obviously linking to the mocking, because he's not actually mighty, he's not actually worth despairing over. So this is again ironic. But also on the other hand, it's actually extremely poignant because it's showing us as the reader or the viewer of this sculpture look on his works and despair. So his works being the broken statue and despair, because this is ultimately what will happen to all of us. We will all die. Sorry, there's no nice way of putting that. There's a lot of what these poets are trying to teach us. In a way, that's a nice message. Don't take things too seriously. Nothing's going to last forever. You know, time is finite. On the other hand, it's quite a scary thought. Anyway, nothing beside remains. Just reminding us, again, there's nothing more there for us. Nothing beside remains. This is it. It's all rather bleak now. And then the final line that I've picked up on is the lone and level sands stretch far away. So here is our ultimate link to the power of nature, because all of us, this statue especially, will crumble, will turn into sand, and the sand will always be there and it will stretch far away, meaning it'll go on forever. The earth was here before us and it'll be here after we've died. People I know say the earth is changing and dying, and that is true, yeah, I'm sure it is, but we are dying at a much quicker rate. So Shelley's message here may appear bleak, but actually it's kind of an in-joke. It's a joke for all of us, people who are not in power, for us to kind of go, you know, treat me how you want, but it's not going to last. Nothing lasts forever. Even the mightiest will fall. So key themes in this poem are, of course, power. It's in the Power and Conflict anthology. Power of authority being one, and power of nature being another. So the three poems that really come to mind with this one, there may be others as well, but these are the three that feel the most linked for me, are London for authority, Tissue for nature, and the prelude is also for nature and authority. So perhaps the prelude would be the ultimate best one to choose. Now, if you would like to have a go at answering a question on this poem, the question I'm giving you today, and I will put it in the link in the box below as well, is compare how the poets present the power of nature in Ozymandias, and in the exam it would say, and one other poem, but in this case I'm giving you the poem, and that is Tissue. So compare how the poets of Ozymandias and Tissue present the power of nature. Thanks for watching. See you again soon. Bye.